If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello listeners, I am your speaker Casey, and as many of you may know, I am currently undertaking the Psychology of Coercive Control Master's course at Salford University. I hope that this course will make me more informed and better equipped for future projects and interviews on the podcast. In the meantime, I will be releasing renewed versions of older episodes with updates from previous guests. If you want to find out what I remember from the time of each interview and get in-depth updates from the guests, I've been writing blog posts as I go through older episodes and adding them to my website, cultvaultpodcast.com, which you can also find links to in the episode description. You can find links on my website for support on navigating recovery from cultic abuse, to learn more about how to help a loved one, or become more informed about the subject of cults and coercive control. My emails are still open, and I am carefully curating a list of guests to speak with once I am back to interviewing officially next year. You can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com if you'd like to get in touch. And now, on to today's updated episode. So hi Fred, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'm really excited to talk about this subject. It's one that I have read a lot about but haven't actually managed to speak to anybody at depth about. And you're an ex-member of this movement.
Yes.
So you're going to have a wealth of knowledge to share with the listeners. Would you like to introduce yourself to those that are listening today?
Yes. I'm using an alias, and it's important that the listeners understand the reason that I'm using an alias is because that the Church of Scientology has a department within itself in the Sea Org. And the Sea Org is like a paramilitary organization that controls the Church of Scientology on a global scale. And they're the enforcers of Scientology's rules. And there's a department within the Sea Org that's called OSA. And OSA is also known as the Office of Special Affairs. And OSA is a very dangerous group of people. They are very smart. They believe in Scientology wholeheartedly, and they're involved at the highest level, the games of manipulative power and control. And the reason they're so close is because they're in charge of enforcing some of Scientology's more destructive principles and policies. And they have a very specific way that they are supposed to act by policy towards people that have defected the Church of Scientology. And so I just want to stress that the reason I don't want to talk with my real name is because I just don't want any part of the things that they would do. It's not even that I guess it's really not that I'm afraid. It's more that I don't have the mental energy to be able to deal with the things that they would do. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it would be catastrophic to my mental health to go through that and have a big public battle with them. And I just don't want to deal with it. And that's why I keep an alias. So I would prefer, as on an instinctual level, to tell people my whole story, and so they could know the real truth, because it is so bizarre, the things that I've seen in everything that I've been privy to within the Church of Scientology. It's unreal story, but I can't, because OSA will they will follow their policies. One of them, the original version, which they still basically do this to this day. The original version says that I could be lied to, tricked, and destroyed. So L. Ron Hubbard originally said that basically it's okay to do anything you want to somebody that is been declared suppressive or that is antagonistic to the policies and principles of the Church of Scientology. So the people in Scientology that go forward and talk in a public manner, the ones that like are on TV, like on Leo Remini's show, and they're using their real names and everything else, they're very brave because no doubt they will, for the rest of their lives, be involved with lawsuits and people spying on them and people killing their dogs, and there's no end to what the church can do to make somebody mentally cave in. They're very good at it, and because in Scientology you have to do exactly what L. Ron Hubbard said, and because the founder said this is the way we deal with these people no matter what, the church is never going to change their scorched earth tactics. It would be off policy for them to do so. So there are people within OSA that specifically listen to these podcasts and specifically go online and find out who's talking about Scientology. And when they find somebody who's going to really make a difference and starts really talking about the truth, they attack like a pack of savage dogs. So that's I use the alias.
Yeah.
And that's also why I can't get into too many specifics. I can't allow OSA to narrow down who I am and attack me.
Yeah. And I think that's completely fair enough. We've just been discussing before we hit the record button the fact that you can speak to the policies and practices of the Church of Scientology, but you can't necessarily relate those back to personal incidents that would identify who you are specifically, which I think everybody listening can completely appreciate. So I'm speaking with Fred today, and you were in the church for 20 years, is that right?
That's correct.
So can you give the listeners sort of a brief introduction to Scientology, people who might not know what the church is about and sort of what they do, what their practices and beliefs are? Can you give us a quick rundown and then go into sort of how you ended up in Scientology? Yeah.
Well, first off, I was born in Scientology. Both of my parents were Scientologists. Second, third generation, yeah. Yeah, actually, even my some of my grandparents are Scientologists.
Right. Okay. So like a second or third. Third generation Scientologist. Wow.
Correct. A lot of extended family are Scientologists as well.
And do you still have family in the church?
I do. Yeah. Unfortunately, I do.
And how does that work once you have left the movement? Are you sort of is there any shunning involved where you're kind of not permitted to keep contact anymore?
I was smart enough that I never did anything that made them specifically say that he's what they call a suppressive person.
Okay.
So I never publicly did anything that said like attacked the church. I did give I spoke publicly using my real name and everything else to a group of skeptics, atheists, and but what I only told them the exact way that Scientology thinks about their worldview, in other words,
right,
and what the policies are and what it says and what the beliefs are. I never produced any opinion on the church. Now, what's curious about that is somehow they found out that I was giving that talk, that public talk, and they sent people to watch.
Oh, that's so creepy.
Yeah, and I recognized those people.
And so you knew at the time of giving this talk to this group that you were being watched.
That's right.
How did that make you feel when you realized that you knew who they were?
I thought it was kind of funny, because it just kind of made me smile, because I was thinking, like, how paranoid are they? Like, it kind of actually reaffirmed that I'm doing the right thing, because I was thinking, like, why would they be so paranoid that they would go and monitor this thing, But I also knew why, So, because I had lived that life before, and so it made me smile, but it also intimidated me a little bit. I'll tell you why it was funny, why I smiled so much. It's because Scientology policies are so freaking bizarre by themselves. And when you talk publicly about Scientology and you realize, like, how crazy does this sound? This must just sound totally nuts. I thought, well, they're watching me, and I'm not going to say anything that isn't completely true. I'm going to say it exactly how it is, and that's going to be enough to make this whole audience be like, what in the actual, So I, yeah, it was fun.
And you talked to this group about the basic beliefs and policies of Scientology. So what types of things did you discuss?
So if you're going to sum up, so what you should understand is that Scientology is a body of work that is, as far as like a text, like actual written words. Scientology is like, if you go to an old library and you see like these old encyclopedia volumes, and they're like, I don't know, like maybe 2.5 or 3 inches thick, so pretty thick, and they're like they're a full legal size. They're not letterhead, they're legal head, so they're like the legal pages, which are pretty big. And they're these huge encyclopedia volumes. Okay, that's like those old encyclopedias that you might see in a library. A full Encyclopedia Britannica set.
Right, yeah.
The Scientology as a body of policies is like 3 of those sets. It's a tremendous amount of official text. And in fact, if you do a course in Scientology called the SHBC, or the St. Hill Hubbard Special Briefing Course, that's the name of the course. If you study that in Scientology full time, like 10 hours a day for 1 year, it takes that long just to do half of the amount of volume.
Wow.
Of knowing all the official policies of Scientology. So, yeah, I mean, it would take somebody 3 or 4 years to actually understand what really Scientology is in totality. But I'm going to try to sum it up in like a couple of sentences as best as I can.
Yes.
This is my explanation of like, what is Scientology? Okay. Scientology is a group of policies written by this man named L. Ron Hubbard. And what it means, the whole body of text, what it means is that we are essentially a spiritual being. And in Scientology, a spiritual being is called a thetan.
A thetan.
Yes.
Okay.
We are a spiritual being that has lived for approximately 76 trillion years of existence. And prior to that 76 trillion years, there was a different type of existence, almost like another universe.
Right.
And in that different type of existence, I believe that the Thetans were actually all together as one big living thing.
Right, okay.
And that 76 trillion years ago or so, there was I think like a disbursement, and then we're all individual thetans. Okay.
Right.
And then for 76 trillion years, we followed a pattern of living or pattern of existence, which included sometimes doing things that were unethical, sometimes doing things that we shouldn't have done, or things that we did do or didn't do that we should have done. The original state of that person,
Right,
or that theta. Theta in Scientology is like good energy.
okay, yeah.
So essentially, by itself, a spiritual being or thetan is theta energy. All right, and it's known as a static. In Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard expresses a thetan as a static, which is something that has no wavelength, no time, and all these definitions. Right. Okay, so 76 trillion years ago, thetans, plural, was born. Okay, and over that huge amount of time, going throughout life, these thetans encountered problems, and the problems were that whenever they did something wrong or didn't do something that they should have done, then they were because thetans are basically good, basically ideological, or basically benevolent. When they do something wrong, or they don't do something that they should have done, that's called committing an overt act.
Okay.
And when you commit an overt act in Scientology, you actually want to stop yourself from doing it again. And what you need to do to relieve yourself of that is to write up your overts and withholds. You need to have somebody fully acknowledge, see in its full truth and totality, and acknowledge that you did something wrong, and then you need to take responsibility for that.
Right.
So over these trillions of years, the thetans have reduced themselves to living in physical bodies.
Okay.
And they have reduced their capabilities, and they have reduced their potential, and they have reduced their ability to perceive, and because a thetan is originally a very powerful being, a very godlike entity. We're all godlike entities that have been reduced down through the trillions of years of lifetimes of death and pain and unconsciousness and committing overt acts that have deteriorated our sense of self and well-being and so forth.
Okay.
Scientology is the solution to digging ourselves out of this, what they call dwindling spiral.
Okay.
So it's a play on eternity. They want you to feel like your eternity is at risk if you don't do Scientology, because the earth is just gonna keep getting worse, and thetans are just gonna keep hurting each other, and so in Scientology, your job is to save mankind, salvage the thetans that are trapped here on this prison planet.
Okay.
That is summing up Scientology in as short as it can be made.
So when your parents are kind of drawn into this movement, they're not told the story as you've just told it straight away. It must be slowly introduced. It has to be sort of right. Yeah. Do you know sort of roughly what age they were when they joined the church?
My mother was 17, very influential age. In fact, Scientology preys on somebody's inclination towards narcissism, or I would say inclination towards self-aggrandizement. So when you're a young person, I think it's very easy for you to feel embellished. You're easy influenced, and you have a lot of energy. That energy can be steered in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. It's sort of weird how when you're a young person, you or at least I naturally had a desire that I wanted to solve the world's biggest problems. And I think a lot of teenagers are like that. But you get somebody who's in their 30s, let's say, and they're more resistant to reality because they've failed.
Yeah, or they start to lose family members around them because as you get older, you become surrounded more by death, unfortunately, and loss and tragedy, and you have these responsibilities. Sometimes even financial responsibility can be enough to kind of bury your head in the sand and look for something that, somebody comes and tells you that you're Satan and, trillions of years ago, you were a godlike being that was unstoppable and amazing and had all these, amazing things. You weren't bound to your human body or your financial responsibilities. And somebody at the age of 30 plus might be like, do you know what? That sounds like paradise right now. So it is definitely interesting. And did your parents meet within Scientology?
I don't really know the whole story, but I assume that yes, that they met through the church.
Okay.
And I wanted to tell you something.
Okay.
The way that the church gets somebody into the church.
Okay, yep.
As opposed to going too much into my personal circumstances, the way that the church traditionally gets somebody involved in Scientology is they use a tactic called ruining them.
Oh, okay.
And this is one of those Scientology words that means something completely different. The policy of ruining someone means that we have this. The way the system works is a Church of Scientology org is usually near someone's big city, right? Like it could, like in the UK, they have one in East Grinstead, and I think they have one in London. East Grinstead is definitely one of the hallmark, picturesque locations of Scientology, which is on England's southeast coast, I believe. And you have one of these churches, or what we call a Class 5 org. These are going to be in your big cities like Melbourne, I believe, is one. Portland is one. Boston, these major cities have these what we call Class 5 orgs. A Class 5 org traditionally was trying to get as big as St. Hill Manor in England.
Okay.
And then David Miscavige changed the way that works and said that they're going to become what's called ideal. And so it was just sort of, they changed it a little bit. But you have these Class 5 orgs, somebody standing outside with an e-meter, and then you have people who are called body routers. And the body router is somebody whose job it is just to get the person to go inside the church. Or their job is to get the person and take them to take a stress test.
Okay.
And that's where you see these Scientologists stand on the outside in front of their Class 5 org with an e-meter, which is an electronic machine that reads light electronic impulses on your skin. So they go and they get the person to sit down and they give them what's called a stress test. And in the stress test, they run down different questions like, is there something that brings particular stress to your life? And when the person sees that the question, when they analyze the question, they can see how the needle moves on the machine.
Okay.
They can see how that response in their mind registered on the machine because the needle moves. And then they might also do something which I thought was pretty clever, where you pinch the person and you watch on the machine the needle when the person gets pinched and it moves.
Okay. So like a physical reaction to pain then as well.
That's right. Because your wavelengths in your body are getting messed up is what Scientology says. Then they tell the person to think about the time when they got pinched, and then the needle moves again.
Oh, okay. That's clever. That's clever.
Yeah, it's almost like a polygraph.
It sounds very similar, doesn't it? And
it works in almost the exact same way, actually.
So it's just sort of like a response to negative stimuli or thoughts. Did you ever take any of these tests?
Yes. Yes, I took a stress test when I was like 10 just to try it, and then but I was already in the church at the time, and I took a personality test, which is another one of their things that they get people to do when they're new. Okay. But anyhow, I transgressed. The person is out front walking by one of these Class 5 orgs, and one of these body routers takes them to the guy giving them the stress test or the personality test, and that's what gets them started. And then the recruiter or the guy that handles these people directly, he's a little bit better at the tactics. All right. A body router, they might just use a new person like, hey, go body route people.
Right.
But this guy really knows what he's doing and is probably a veteran Scientologist. And his job is to ruin the people that have just walked in. And what that means is you find out by asking the person questions, what is their biggest problem in their life that they've been having? Like, is it relationship issues, or are they a drug addict, or did their mom just die, or whatever the problem is, Scientology has a golden solution.
Okay.
And a lot of these introductory solutions do help those people work through whatever it is those problems are. And they'll get the person through those problems. And then now the person says, wow, this Scientology stuff really helped me. This might actually be something to this. And that is how I'd say 90% of people over the years have gotten involved in Scientology if they were not born into it.
So you think that these people who they are referred to, who run these tests, they're probably very good at reading body language and psychology and all the things that people might give away when they answer questions. So you've got the physical test in front of you that you're taking, as well as somebody who has years of experience watching you respond to certain questions and things as well.
Well, generally speaking, the person does not have any sort of knowledge of psychology whatsoever at all.
Okay.
Because Scientologists inherently reject any form of psychiatry or psychology.
Okay.
And number two, they're not reading the person's body language whatsoever at all. What they're doing is simply this. They are just following the policies of how L. Ron Hubbard says you should deal with new public.
Okay.
And they're only doing what that says.
Okay.
Now, the person might have, been a car salesman or something like that in the past. Or he might have had more or less experience dealing with like more of a sales type position. But other than that, he is simply just doing exactly what L. Ron Hubbard said to do. And that is to ruin the person.
Okay.
Find out. And the objective of ruining them is to find out what their biggest weakness is in their life and give them the Scientology solution, of which is inexhaustible. There's no problem that somebody could possibly have that isn't covered by Scientology in some way.
And is this where the tier system comes in, where people can pay to have their problems resolved?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the beginning of that journey. The first thing is, okay, let's say somebody comes in and they've been ruined by their recruiter, or what they call a reg or registrar.
Okay.
The registrar has found out that the guy's biggest problem is that he can't hold a job.
Okay.
He works a job for 3 or 4 months and then he gets fired, or he works a job for a year and he gets let go, or he just can't stay. He can't hold a stable job.
Okay.
The person, but other than that, his life's great. He's got the wife and kids and the house and everything else, but he just hasn't been able to hold down a job. And so they give him a book called The Problems of Work.
Okay.
Okay. And this is like a $12 or $15 book with a course that the guy can do.
Yeah.
It's easier to read than a lot of the other Scientology materials. And so this guy can do this little check sheet, this little problem solving kind of booklet that goes with after you read the chapters in the book, and then he can apply these policies to his job that he currently has, and he can suddenly hold a job.
So for less than $20, that problem's been fixed for him.
Correct.
And then he thinks, but actually, there's a couple of other things I've been struggling with.
That's right.
and the next book is $50.
And then
right.
then they want you to do the purification rundown, which is okay. Fred, you've been doing great. You got your job now. You got some money. You got all your everything taken care of. But you told us that you used to smoke pot every day, and that you back when you were in college you did some cocaine, and also the environment is toxic and polluted. So we want you to do the purification rundown. That's going to get all of the drugs and toxins and all that nasty stuff out of your system. And then that way you'll be healthier and more able to get better in the long term. Because those drugs and the drug use and the painkillers and the fluoride that's in the water and everything else, that's been building up in your system, and it's making you not as easy to work with mentally. So you want to get rid of all that stuff. So the person, then he pays $800 to do the purification. And he sits in a sauna and sweats and drinks a lot of water and takes a lot of vitamins for a few weeks. And the sweating is releasing those toxins from the person's fat cell. That's what Scientology says, which scientifically it's not really how it works, but that's what Scientology says how it works. So then he does the purification rundown and all the toxins, and he gets out of there and he feels refreshed and better, and oh my God, I got a job again and now I feel great. And okay, now it's time for you to start auditing. So now we're going to find the times of pain and unconsciousness in your life and times of loss in your life. And we're going to audit you, and we're going to get rid of these times of pain and unconsciousness by going over them again and again.
All right.
And eventually you're going to start to remember your past life times of pain and unconsciousness in your birth. And that's when it starts the person on this journey.
Wow.
And that's usually a lifelong journey.
So there's obviously many layers to the indoctrination of this movement, and it sounds like we spoke about. You're not just told about the Thetans straight away. You are gradually introduced to the the history and views of Scientology. And you mentioned that you took your first stress test at the age of 10. Were you homeschooled or did you attend regular education?
I was homeschooled for a while.
Okay.
But I've been also in public schools.
And how is that as a...
I've also been in Scientology schools.
Oh, okay. And what was the most unusual type of education for you out of those three?
Homeschool was fine. It was pretty straightforward. That's where I learned how to read. Mm-hmm. I actually learned how to read later than most kids do, because when I was really young, I wasn't really in school.
Okay.
And I remember being 5 years old and not being able to read anything whatsoever at all. But then I started homeschool and I was taught how to read. And I really loved reading. And so I actually became like a super avid reader in a very short amount of time. I learned how to read. It might have taken me about a week or I don't know. I remember it taking once I actually learned the alphabet, it took me like 2 or 3 weeks to learn how to read. And then bam, I was reading whole books. So I was actually late to start reading, but then once I started reading, I had by the time I was in the actual 4th grade, I had an after college graduate reading level. I remember that specifically because when I was in the 4th grade, I was in public school and I did a reading aptitude test and I aced it.
Yeah.
So then my teacher called me in to her office and they wanted to test. They had never had a kid get a perfect reading score. And so they wanted to test me how far it would go. And, in the 4th grade, you're only, 9 or 10 years old.
Yep.
So they started giving me middle school reading tests and then college reading tests. And then they found out that my vocabulary at 10 years old was that of a college graduate. So, but the reason why it was like that is because I was taught how to read the Scientology way.
Yeah.
And I guess when you're a kid, you just soak up, learning so fast. But I was taught the Scientology way, which is that every time you go across a word that you do not understand, you look up the word in a dictionary and you clear the word and you make all these sentences with every single definition of that word. And then you come back to reading after you're done clearing the words. So you never go through a sentence that you don't completely understand. And, even if you just read 10 books of moderate level reading comprehension and you clear every single word, your vocabulary is already expanded considerably.
Yeah.
So just imagine a 6, 7, and 8-year-old kid, reading classic works of literature like To Kill a Mockingbird and so forth.
So you've been homeschooled, your regular education, your teachers are impressed with your level of knowledge at your age. Yeah. Do you feel ostracized at all because you are a Scientologist in a school with kids who don't understand the movement that you're a part of?
I mean, I have a little bit, not really. A little bit, though.
What's it like to attend a school that is for Scientologists?
It's a trip.
I mean, do they have actual curriculum? Do they have maths, English?
Yeah, Scientology, actually, the kids who grow up in Scientology are some of the most incredibly well-educated human beings on earth. In Scientology, if you were raised in it and you go to Scientology schools, you learn so many words. Your vocabulary becomes enormous, and your ability to understand things on a really basic, intrinsic level is probably higher than most, I'd say. And so public school was usually when I went to public school, it was really easy because these kids were just having a hard time just trying to understand very basic like concepts, which Scientology like mapped out for me 10 years ago. You know, like I remember being in the 9th grade, I was in a public school, and I had been, you know, educated, you know, most of the time up until that time in Scientology. And I was being taught, like, for instance, in math class, you know, principles that we had learned when I was like 6 or something.
Yeah.
So, you're learning stuff in public schools when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. You know, that's a lot of times Scientologists have learned that stuff when they were 8 or 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And your reading level as a long-term Scientologist is like doctorate level. If somebody were an expert, like a doctorate of any subject, you know, if somebody were an expert in quantum physics, that person has a super advanced vocabulary in quantum physics.
Yep.
A Scientologist and been in Scientology for 20 years has that level of vocabulary, but with all subjects imaginable.
All subjects that you would find in the standard curriculum you've learned at a deeper level.
Yeah.
Scientology.
The reason for all this is because L. Ron Hubbard has more written words in and outside of Scientology, more written words than any published author in the history of the world. He's actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the most physical words in publication. So he's printed more literature than anyone in the world. And L. Ron Hubbard's vocabulary was off the chain. It was enormous. And so a lot of the materials that you study when you're in Scientology have these ridiculous old school words and definitions. You know, like all these different words from the 50s and 60s and 40s that people don't ever really use anymore in conversation or in writing. Those are all in Scientology. So it's actually unnecessary, but I think Scientologists probably have the most advanced vocabulary of anyone.
And do your parents have to pay money to send you to Scientology school?
In some of them, yes. Yeah. In some of the more prestigious Scientology schools, the parents have to pay $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And in some of them, it's just like a local Scientology parent who wants their kids to have a good education, so she starts a little school.
Okay.
And that, you know, and maybe the parents pay $100 a week or something. But there's different levels for sure.
And
definitely the richest Scientologists in the world send their kids to a place called Delphi or Delphian.
Okay.
The richest 5% of Scientologists who typically, and there are quite a few wealthy Scientologists, the richest ones all try to send their kids to these schools called Delphi. And there's one in Florida, there's one in Oregon, and there's one in LA, and I think there's also one in Sacramento. So I think there's 4. There actually may have been a 5th one now that I think about it in Massachusetts.
Okay.
So there may be 5, but I haven't kept up with that in a long time. So there may be less than that, or there may be more. I don't know. But if you're a rich Scientologist, like, yeah, you want to send your kids to Delphi because Delphi is considered like the ideal education in Scientology.
And do you have any idea how many numbers roughly Scientology says they have practicing members worldwide?
Yes, I do. I was always told as a kid that there was about 13 million Scientologists. And I had seen a publication in Freedom magazine, which is one of the Scientology issued magazines when I was I think 12 or 13, and they had said that there was, I think like 15 million members.
Okay.
And but what they said all the time, which I remember hearing, I don't know, 500 or 600 times as a kid, was that Scientology was the fastest growing religion on earth. They always told us that. And we always heard that Scientology was the fastest growing religion. If you compare that with the actual numbers of how many Scientologists there are, the real numbers are that the church has around in 1990, the church had the highest fundamental members.
Right.
Of around 100,000 people actively involved in Scientology. And that number has dwindled down today in the current 1990 being the peak of Scientologists.
Right.
That's actually been trending down for since then. And now there's less than 20,000 active Scientologists in the whole world. And they're being told, but all the Scientologists are being told that there's, 13 or 15 million or something like that. Yeah. And and they try to make it seem like it doubles every year. But I mean, I was told that if there was 18 million in I don't know, 2003, and it hasn't doubled every year since then, because they'd have like probably I don't know, 1 billion members or something.
Yeah, if it kept doubling every year, eventually the whole world would be part of the church, wouldn't they?
That's what they want. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefly before the Sea Org, and in our correspondence, it sounded as though you were actually a part of this at one point during your time within Scientology.
That's true.
And what does the training look like to become a member of the Sea Org? Does it happen organically, or is it something you have to strive for within the church?
No. The Sea Org is desperate for new members. So they want new members. They want to get anybody they can who's in Scientology in the Sea Org. It's not like you have to earn it. It's more like they're trying to drag as many people as they can into that shit.
Okay.
The Sea Org is extremely understaffed, and they need people to help desperately. So growing up in Scientology, you're constantly recruited to be in the Sea Org. You constantly have people trying to get you to join the Sea Org, and their recruiting tactics are extremely aggressive. And they use that eternity over your head, and they try to embellish your sense of worth and well-being by saying that, hey, you're going to be able to join the group of people that's actually doing something about changing the world, and that we can actually, through Scientology, we can erase poverty and famine and drug use, and we can get people clear, and we can free our planet, and we can go on to other planets and do it again. And you're going to be a part of this organization whose sole job it is to save mankind. It's amazing. This is the most selfless thing you can do. This is the best thing you're ever going to do in your whole life. You're going to be a part of this incredible group of people whose mission it is to save and salvage mankind in this sector of the galaxy. And they'll recruit people for 10 hours straight
Wow.
Just pumping them up and filling them up with all this bullshit.
Yeah.
And trying to get them to join. And some of them do. And unfortunately, I was one of those people.
And what did your responsibilities look like once you'd been